I am going to go ahead and record.
It is spring break week. Do you know if Molly was able to send out a bump to her sustainable teachers network?
I did share it out, yeah. And we've also been connected with a few other people at ASU that are leading a webinar next week on single-use plastics in the cafeteria. And so with that kind of one visual image and the links to the Food Waste Prevention Week page, I'm hoping that they sent out all of that together, all of those links at the same time, as well as the art contest information, which is really exciting. And I like that it extends beyond the Food Waste Prevention Week and goes to, I don't think submissions are due until after Earth Day, which is fun. And I think that they've added in an author reading as well for a food waste children's novel or children's
Yeah,
book.
that's what Elaine was saying. That's cool.
Yeah, and I know that they've been testing out a poetry contest this year as well in Florida. Awesome. Well, to respect everyone's time, I'm going to go ahead and get us started by doing a quick introduction to Food Waste Prevention Week. So we're really excited to have Melissa Terry joining us today from University of Arkansas, or should I say from Costa Rica, from their spring break that's happening now in Arkansas. This is the very first start of Food Waste Prevention Week, which is officially April 1st through April 7th, 2024, so just in a couple of weeks. But we really wanted to kick it off by doing a series of webinars that provide kind of tutorials and different tools to add to a school's essential tool belt of what can be done to tackle food waste at a school. That might be generated from students or from teachers even, but really wanting to find a way to implement different strategies, to measure, to analyze, and then to ultimately find a way to reduce that food waste that's occurring. And so through a series of webinars, we have been talking about how to bring food waste into the English language arts class. Today, we'll be talking about leading a food waste audit through this 101 course, but also talking about different strategies from share tables to composting to bulk milk dispensers in order to fight that food waste from occurring through prevention and reduction strategies, plus a school looking at single-use plastics in school cafeterias, plus many more other topics that you can find online at foodwastepreventionweek.com. And so Food Waste Prevention Week, for those that may not be familiar, is a national event that occurs for 1 week every single year. And typically it's going to be April 1st through April 7th. And it brings together nonprofit partners, businesses, educators, universities, and interested team members and individuals that are all trying to tackle food waste in their communities. So by putting together different events that are local or that are virtual via a series of webinars, it's a way to kind of build a larger national community and see where the conversation is around food waste and what people are doing to reduce and prevent it. So as part of the K-12 Student Engagement Committee, this year we're doing a series of webinars. As I mentioned earlier this week we had Bring Food Waste into English Language Arts class, into the English Language Arts classroom, which was recorded and will be put on the Food Waste Prevention Week YouTube page. Today we are lucky enough to talk with Melissa about leading a food waste audit through this 101 series. And upcoming we have upcycling, transforming waste into art, another art activity, step up to the plate art and food waste activity, Verma compost session in Spanish, looking at single-use plastics in school cafeterias, and learning about how to create young food heroes that are tackling food waste, a session in both English and in Spanish the week of April 1st through April 7th. And so, as mentioned today, we will be talking about Food Waste Audits 101, turning food waste into education and action. My name is Mary Jane Chandler, and I'm from World Wildlife Fund. And I am joined today by Melissa Terry, a food researcher at the University of Arkansas. To get us started, we had a quick poll for everyone to fill out that I'm going to launch really quick, just to kind of understand who else in the room and have the chance to get to know each of you. So the first question for this Food Waste Prevention Week Food Waste Audit poll is I am joining and feel free to share who you're here representing. The second question is, have you participated in a food waste audit? We'd love to know your background and your experience with this. And the third question, how would you describe student food waste? In your own words, this can be one sentence or less. It can be even a mix of 3 words. How would you describe it from what you've seen, what you've heard, and or what you think about food waste? And we'll give everyone just a couple of minutes to complete those questions. And just a quick reminder, we are recording today's webinar so we can put this on the Food Waste Prevention Week YouTube page. At the end of the presentations, we will go into a Q&A, so feel free to continuously insert any questions as we're speaking, but we'll also have the opportunity to discuss them afterward. Additionally, the chat function should be open. If you have any comments or feedback or questions throughout that you'd like to share with everyone, feel free to use this as well. For those of you just joining, we have launched a food waste audit poll. It has 3 questions just based on who you're joining us from. Have you participated in a food waste audit before? And how would you describe student food waste? We'll just give one more minute for folks to answer these questions. I am seeing a few school district representatives, which is really exciting, and a mix of yeses and nos to participating in a food waste audit. Wonderful. So I'm going to end the poll, but thank you everyone for adding in your contributions. Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. We can share this out and view in more details. Oops. All righty. So to kind of get us started, and thank you again for participating in our poll. We're just going to do some background context into what is the overall large landscape of food waste in across schools in the US. So I'm going to ask the question, how much food waste do we generate in schools annually? And you can use the chat function to answer this question. It should be open and available to everyone. But I'm just curious, how much food waste do we think is generated in schools annually across the US? And this answer is going to be in tons. And feel free to throw out any number. There's no wrong or right answer here. All right, we have 1,000, 10,000. 10,000 is getting closer. Any other guesses people want to share on how much food waste we think is generated in schools annually? 15,000, getting warmer. Awesome. Well, it's actually 530,000 tons of food that's wasted annually across K through 12 school cafeterias. So this was collected from a report that World Wildlife Fund led in 2019, where it worked with 46 schools across 9 cities. And through this process of leading food waste audits in the schools, it found out this kind of approximate guesstimation of what is the total amount of tons that is being thrown away from leftover food, which is after students have finished eating, what is physically kind of going to the trash from their trays. And so this number is huge. If we think about one school bus and visualize this in our head, and we imagine this school bus filled with students, and then we multiply this by 26,000, that's the equivalent of what this 530,000 tons is actually equal to in volume and in size. And so from this, we know that food waste is really occurring in school cafeterias. And through research that's been led from multiple different groups especially since from 2019 and led by WWF, we recognize that food waste is a critical social and environmental problem. But why is that exactly? So environmentally, we know that food waste generates greenhouse gas emissions, specifically of CO2 equivalent, specifically from this 530,000 tons coming from school cafeterias. This is equal to 1.9 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent release of greenhouse gas emissions. We also know that it's a major contributor of using water, specifically with this amount coming from schools. That's about 20.9 billion gallons of water that's used, all from the production phase, but also in the transportation and distribution and storage of getting food to the cafeteria to students. In an economic standpoint, I think that this amount of food that is being thrown away can have a really large impact. That 530,000 is equal to 1.7 billion US dollars. And when we think about what that could do in terms of providing additional funds for infrastructure in a cafeteria, providing additional funds for capacity or other resources that a school might need, it has a really big weight on what those cost savings potentials really could be. The bottom 3 graphics show more of the details of what this report really found in terms of participating schools and how implementing a food waste reduction or strategy, including an audit, what the impact was in reducing food waste, breaking that up into milk waste, how milk waste was reduced through the implementation of different strategies, as well as the impact this has on younger students. So elementary schools are one of the largest contributors to elementary school students are known to generate more food waste. I think there's still a lot that is being studied around why this is exactly, but I also think that it shows a really amazing opportunity that when elementary schools are really focused on, they can have a really large impact on reducing that food waste from occurring. So again, on more of a social impact around food waste. 1 in 8 Americans are food insecure. And so when we think about the food that is going to waste and consider other opportunities from implementing a share table in a school or leading other food recovery and food donation projects, in the same idea of reducing food waste, but also increasing consumption, we see the impact that it can potentially have on food security, which is how these two are linked with one another. And so recognizing the problem, the WWF Food Waste Warriors team has also started to look into what the solution can be to really help bring that number of food waste being generated across cafeterias down. And starting to recognize that partnering with K through 12 schools to help them measure, analyze, and address their cafeteria food waste is a really kind of great way to understand what is really happening, and what are some ideas that can be worked with, that we can work with in order to reduce or prevent that. I also just want to give a shout out that food waste is always going to occur, I think, to some degree. And so this really isn't about putting anything on to the schools themselves, but providing additional resources and technical assistance based on what is being seen on the research side and on a national level of different strategies and ideas, and really working closely with the schools themselves to help them create some tailored initiative on what is going to benefit their students the most, their communities the most, and really reducing that food waste from happening. Maybe it's a cost savings driver. Maybe it's a food security driver. Maybe it's an environmental driver. I think all of these things are going to occur, but it's really trying to figure out what is going to have the largest impact at your school. And as we'll talk about today, there are a lot of different strategies out there. And one of the best ones is leading a food waste audit to initially kind of understand what that landscape is. So this is just kind of a quick snapshot before I pass it over to Melissa to really dive into the amazing, juicy details around what all can be done in a school. So these are past examples that the Food Waste Warrior program at WWF has led across the US, including a share table, which is in the top left photo here. And you can see all of the milk cartons that have been collected, and cheese sticks, packages of apples that have been collected and stored in a cool container to then redistribute to students um, that might still be hungry after they finish their meal period, and even students that might bring lunch from home. And the middle photo, this is an opportunity for engaging with students themselves and bringing their voice as part of the conversation, bringing in their creativity through creating signage, but also asking them questions and getting their feedback. And then finally, the top photo is just showing composting and different strategies of kind of closing the loop and showing that food is something that is separated from other trash and other materials, and it can still provide value even after a student might be done eating it. And so lastly, this kind of gets into the really big meat of what we're talking about today, which is fighting food waste with cafeteria audits. I just wanted to quickly share the reasons why we encourage food waste audits, and the importance of measuring them. And so the picture on the right just kind of shows what a food waste audit looks like on the ground. You can see there's a lot of bins involved, there's a lot of hands, and there's a lot of students too that are like looking at these pictures as well. So it's really to spark curiosity among students and staff, to transform the cafeteria into an educational hub where students dive hands-on into the what, how, and why of food waste, and then giving them the opportunity to share feedback and tangible results with school leaders and food nutrition services and even other teachers. I think being able to graph the food waste that they're measuring in a math class, or write a poem about it in an English language arts class, or even bring it into the arts classroom by drawing pictures of food that is meaningful to them. There's a lot of opportunities to carry this even outside of the cafeteria. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Melissa Terry to introduce herself, but also to share more about the work that they've been leading on the research side and policy side as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Mary Jane. I am going to hang on. Let me try to make sure that I've got my presentation pulled up and ready. Here we go.
So, and I will stop sharing here.
Okay, just thinking about it. Let's see. Okay. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and go over here. Okay, can y'all see that?
Perfect.
Okay, put it in presentation mode. There we go. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, Mary Jane, for all of your work on this topic and for a great introduction into the framework of being a food waste hero and from a kid's point of view, but then also the wheres and the whys. So I like to think about this framework as in growing healthy communities and facilitating closed loop food systems in the National School Lunch Program. This presentation focuses on school student food waste audits during the lunch period, although practitioners within the school food system know that there are breakfast programs, summer meal programs, and whatnot. But for the purposes of this presentation, we will focus on the lunch program. My background is I have a master's of science in agricultural and extension education, and have worked in the school food conservation sort of environment for the past 12 years. So we'll just go ahead and get started. So one of the really great ways to think about the big picture is it's a handy little infographic from the USDA that talks about like some of the things that schools can do today. Some of them sound really easy, but are not as easy, like extending the lunch period or lunch before recess. Time is really tight, but these are some ideas. And a quote that I really admire and appreciate from the USDA's Office of the Chief Economist is that K-12 schools have a special role not only in reducing, recovering, and recycling food waste on their premises, but also in educating the next generation about recovering wholesome excess food for donation and about reducing food waste to conserve natural resources. As Mary Jane said, this is webinar is being recorded, so some of these links you'll be able to check out at your leisure following the presentation. So this was one of the original sort of food waste prevention hierarchies that EPA created that helped us think about what's sort of like the inverted triangle of how to think about what do we do with surplus food. And so obviously the first step is don't grow as much if we have a certain item that we have way too much of, or don't purchase as much. If we do have extra, we feed hungry people first. We feed animals. The second and third part of the triangle, well, actually the orange and the yellow part of the triangle have been updated, and we'll see that as far as the new recently released wasted food scale from USDA kind of amends that and swapped places that we feed people first, we donate, we do food recovery. Food recovery can mean as much schools are able to donate surplus unopened items. One of the things that my school did, I was inside of a school district for 6 years and worked within our administrative system to create a closed loop food system as much as possible in our elementary school. So when we had surplus items from the lunch program, we would put them in a fridge specifically dedicated for food recovery. And so that at the end of the school day, when we had after school programs, if there were extra items, we could serve those to students. So we feed people first, we feed animals next, we feed the soil next, and then when possible, we apply that compost to the land. We want to avoid putting food-related or even liquid food products down the drain, in the landfill, or incinerating. So landfilling food waste is a huge source of methane. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. We have lots of very big obstacles in thinking about climate change, but preventing food from going into the landfill is a very simple, everybody can do it solution. And so one of the ways that I've heard a colleague describe it is food waste in the landfill is the dumbest problem we have to solve. So I think that that's something that we can join in no matter where we are within the spectrum of working on food conservation projects. So again, there's a link down at the bottom of this page that takes you there. The 7 steps of a school food waste audit. This is a quick little handy chart that was published by the National Academy of Medicine in partnership with the USDA, and our guide to how to conduct student food waste audits. So that brings us to the actual guide itself. So this guide, I was very fortunate enough to co-write with colleagues from the EPA and the USDA. There are links to each of these agencies that are at the bottom. The EPA has a link, and then so does the USDA. In this guide is a step-by-step process, a resource for schools. What do you need? I think one of the things that is the trickiest is how to get started, and how to just kind of assemble materials, but it's very low tech. It's super simple to get set up. The hardest part, I'm just going to scoot back here, is just organizing your team. Step number 1 is what's really, really important, is organizing a good team. So let me just go back to here, and I will, let's see here. Whoop, not that one. Is if we go to get this bar here, there we are. So this is just a quick look at the EPA's page. It's got a link.
We can still only see the presentation.
Oh, is that right? Okay, well, I'll just go back to that. So you can just click on those links, and then it'll take you to that page. So thanks for letting me know that, rather than just be bopping. Okay, so let's get that up. We'll go to our next slide. Is the Food Waste Warriors study that Mary Jane mentioned. In that, we talk a lot about the development of this project and the scope of the research. Who all was involved with that? We had many schools, several states. Are you able to see this pulling up, Mary Jane, or is it still just a slide?
It's still showing the slide.
Okay, well, I'll just stick with that then. So you can dive into that following this link. Anyway, so what we found, we did case studies on each of the schools who are our research partners. And the purpose of this was to help us define some baseline data before we published the student food, the guide to conducting student food waste audits. The methodologies that people were using were kind of all over the place. There were some similarities, but for the purposes of comparative analysis and really collecting representative data, it was important that we had some sort of similar methodology that we were all using. So in publishing this guide to student food waste audits, we were able to have a rubric that we could follow, which we then did in this study with WWF and the deep dive. So each of our partner schools followed the methodology inside of the student food waste audit guide. which helped us get the baseline data and some of the results that Mary Jane was mentioning in her presentation. So this is the very first student food waste audit that we did when we were practicing writing the student food waste audit guide. This is my school. These children are now seniors in high school, so it's been a minute. But one of the things that I love about this picture is that in the upper left-hand corner, the photo with the handwritten signs, this just shows like how we just kind of adapted on the spot, because we realized that as we were doing the audit that our liquid waste was pretty substantial, and we wanted to understand the difference between fluid milk waste and other water, juices, whatever. It's mostly water. And so I put this here as a way to just say that field science is adaptive, and you just go with what you see on the ground and figure out like how to collect it and how to make it work, even if it makes your really pretty signs look all of a sudden a little messy because you handwritten a sign and hung it on a bucket. Our data collection, the bottom left-hand side, the bottom left-hand photo, initially was just literally handwriting the data in. You can use an iPad, you can use a whiteboard. The main thing is just give yourself permission to do what feels right. And then one of the reasons why I like to do audits for a whole week is that by the time you get to Friday, you've got a really good rhythm. It also enables you to include more students. In the upper right-hand photo, you can see that we had students, behind the line who were helping do all the sorting. This photo on the right actually shows some cups, which we did after in our third round of food waste audits, because we wanted to see to what extent, if students had water cups available, they would waste less milk. And that turned out to be a really important observation, which we'll get into when we talk about bulk milk. But again, one of the things that I really love about this work is that it transfers to our students the ability to get real data in real time in a topic area that they experience every day, which is school lunch, but also to learn, again, that field science is adaptive, and you go with what you see on the ground and figure out how to manage what you're measuring. So share tables, one of the things that we found was that there was a lot of surplus food, particularly unopened milks, uneaten apples, unopened bars, those kinds of things, unopened yogurts in one of the breakfast audits that we did. What was interesting is that the apples were an item that we had worked really hard in the district to get locally grown apples for our farm to school program. And then to see this many apples, uneaten, they were just like going in the trash until we did this audit, was really heartbreaking. And then when we did the post-audit interviews and we're talking to the students, their response was really like so practical that it was one of those smack my head moments where they were like, our teeth are falling out. We're losing our teeth. We can't bite into these whole apples. And so, yeah, what do you think about it? A third grader, fourth grader, their teeth are falling out because they're losing their teeth. So just basics, practical magic, as one of the students said, of just slicing the apples for them so they can eat them is something that's super simple. There's great pro tips in scratch cooking. Chef Ann Foundation has some good pro tips of, just put a little lemon juice on them before you serve them so they can be prepped ahead of time and they won't turn brown, etc. So this is an audit that we did in Gwinnett County, Georgia, which was one of our pilot schools before we launched the WWF study. This was our USDA farm to school coordinator for the region that came and helped us during the audit. And then again, some really fun children and students behind the line helping us do the audit. In the upper right-hand picture, you'll see one of the things that we did after the audit is that we turned our surplus food items into a living bar graph. And so then from the living bar graph, we transferred, and we talked about data transfer, and we transferred the living bar graph into units onto a paper and then a digital bar graph. So we had posters in the hallways showing these bar graphs that the students made. We made pie charts using the data from our living bar graph. And so there's just lots of really fun ways that you can adapt the information that you get. And then of course the students, once you do this, they want to know, like, well, where's all this food going? And that gets us into an opportunity to talk about share tables. So share tables, there's a lot of confusion about share tables. I've been in so many cafeterias where nutrition directors and cafeteria managers were like, we would love to do share tables, but it's not allowed. It's against the rules. And so I present this as some guidance from USDA that share tables are allowed in the National School Lunch Program. There are time and temperature requirements, the same as anything. And so for milk cartons, you have to keep them up to temp and you have to keep them cool. But you can absolutely, if they are unopened, you can include them in a share table and reserve them to students. They can either come up to get seconds, which in the elementary and the middle school ages, if you serve, they allow students to come up to the share tables and get seconds. There's a certain idea that like students won't come up there because they're embarrassed, and that is complete baloney. They will come up and get those extra milks or get those extra oranges and apples. Put them in can't put milks in your backpack because time and temperature, but put apples or crackers or whatever to have later. And then at your cafeteria manager can work with whomever is coordinating these inside of the student food waste audits to figure out where is the best place. We had like I said, a refrigerator in the cafeteria, in the kindergarten wing of our building. And so that's where we would take all the extras. And we had student volunteers roll those extras down on the cart, and they absolutely loved being involved in that. I've also done a legal guide to share tables because there was so much confusion about that. And so this link right here, I'm not going to click on it just because I don't want us to get lost again. But if you follow this link, this takes you to a legal guide to best management practices for share tables. And I'll put my contact information on the very last slide, and happy to help any school district or any participant with questions about share tables specifically in their school. So that gets us to the milk waste. And so reducing milk waste in your school. So one of the ways that we can reduce milk waste is through the share tables. But the other is just understanding a few of the basic rules on the ground. So there are some misperceptions that taking a milk is mandatory at lunch, and that is the case from years gone by, but the Healthy and Hunger Free Schools Act of 2010 removed the mandate that students take milk. It is not mandatory in offer versus serve schools. It just has to be offered as an option for students. 2 types of milk have to be offered. So typically that's a 2% milk and a whole milk, or 2% milk and a flavored milk. It really just depends on the district's nutrition directors and policies. So milk waste is easy to reduce by simply offering a reusable 8-ounce cup for students to fill at a bulk milk dispenser or at the water fountain. Having a water fountain in the cafeteria is really important. Some states that's the law, and some states it's not. One of the nutrition concerns of seeing a lot of wasted milk is that if students aren't drinking their milk during lunch and they're wasting it, then that becomes a question of, well, what are they drinking? And if they don't have any options besides milk and they're not drinking the milk, then that means that they are leaving the cafeteria not properly hydrated. And so a hydrated brain is a healthy brain. And so we want to really just reinforce options for students to make the healthy choice is the easy choice. So the top right-hand photo is just milk cartons. Again, this is from the Gwinnett County School District in Georgia, our pilot school. And this, we had 5 bags of just milk cartons alone. And so that was one of the reasons why you do a pilot is so that you can see your blind spots and learn what you don't know. And so what we learned very quickly in a school district that size is that these milk cartons, in addition to the fluid waste of the unconsumed milk, these milk cartons created a substantial percentage of the solid waste in the cafeteria's waste stream. So that means that when we look at the opportunities to use bulk milk dispensers, that completely takes away from the fact that there are any milk cartons at all. So a total reduction in milk carton waste. When we did the WWF study with all the schools, we had a control group school with the Chef Ain Foundation in the Boulder School District. And the reason we chose them was because they had already converted to bulk milk dispensers. And as the control group school, we saw that not only was there no carton waste because there were no cartons, but there was also a statistically significant reduction in the fluid milk waste overall. And that was because there's a little bit of behavioral economic science in that when the students are able to see how much, I'll show you my water cup, when you can see how much is left, it's more compelling to just finish it before you get up and dump your tray, as opposed to a milk carton, which is sat there during your lunch and kind of gotten that soggy little triangle that you drink out of, and it's not very compelling, at least to me. The other is an environmental component, and that bulk milk dispensers use less energy than milk carton coolers, so it's a colder, fresher product. The other thing that we saw in the Boulder County School District was that the milk consumption actually went up in schools that had bulk milk dispensers because the milk was colder. These quotes are directly from students. It tastes better, it's colder, and I can see it. And so thinking about ways in which we can support our local farmers, our regional farmers, milk producers, bulk milk dispensers are a way to serve a colder, fresher product that students remember as something that tastes really good and they like it. And then students who are lactose intolerant who are just thirsty for some water, they have cups to do those things. But again, in the energy conservation component, if you have a milk carton cooler, that just you flip the lid back and there's all the crates of all the milk cartons during the lunch period, the whole time that milk cooler is open, all the refrigeration is competing with the ambient air in the cafeteria, which is why by the end of the lunch service, all those milk cartons are sweating, which is not very attractive, and tells you that there's some energy conservation. You've got cooling competing with heat, and that's what happens there. Whereas that does not happen at all in bulk milk dispensers. So for more information about that, I've included a link to the Chef Ain Foundation's has a really great article on their website, The Lunchbox, that talks about bulk milk dispensers and some of the science behind that. WWF also has a really great publication about the business case for bulk milk dispensers and how that makes financial sense for a school district as well. So when we get into the economics of it, speaking of financial sense, the issue of food waste in cafeterias is not an implication that school food management is fiscally irresponsible but rather it's an indication that students are letting us know that what is on their trays, for whatever reason, was either not desirable or they didn't have time to eat it. There is a significant body of social equity involved in how long students have to wait in line, the last person versus the first person. So that's a study of what we call seated time, like as in your seat, SEAT. So seated time is an important consideration as well. But when we think about looking at the results of a student food waste audit, rather than an opportunity to criticize a school or turn this into an argument of, well, schools don't need as much funding for the National School Lunch Program because look at all the student food waste. Well, that's not the case at all. That is actually counterintuitive. What it's telling us is that when we reduce student food plate waste, then we have saved all those milk cartons that go in the trash. We're paying for that. Those avoided disposal fees that we don't have to pay for are opportunities for us to use those savings in minimizing school food waste to reinvest in higher quality food, support our local farmers, support our regional networks, as example of, some organizations that really focus on that is the National Farm to School Network, the Good Food Purchasing Program, and the Urban School Food Alliance. In conclusion, I'll just wrap it up by saying the schools that reduce food waste can reinvest this money saved into better achieve their mission of educating students while simultaneously improving both the nutrition delivery and local food economies. Lessons learned in the cafeteria can be as impactful as traditional classrooms. So when we talk about STEM, or sometimes we add the A for arts or agriculture and STEAM, such as Mary Jane was talking about, we can make graphs, we can do agricultural geography examples of like, let's follow this food back to the field. How far did it come? From where did it come? Where is it growing? Who are my farmers? Anyway, that the lessons and opportunities for education are not just imperative for our students who are going to be adults dealing with a very rapidly changing climate and thinking about not just what to do, but how to think about what to do. This is a really great set of tools that provide some of those kind of structural frameworks for how do I break down a very big problem that seems really complicated into simple steps of analysis, regardless of whether I'm in the 2nd grade or the 12th grade or a PhD level student. So speaking of grade levels, WWF has these really great lessons and activities by grade levels from K through 12 through 9 through 12. One thing we did in our district is that we followed those students who were in the first picture from the elementary school, and then we did another set of audits when they were in middle school. We had planned to do another set of audits in junior high, but COVID kind of prevented that. Not kind of, COVID totally prevented that. And then when they got to high school, those students actually took it upon themselves to do a high school food waste audit in their own cafeteria and took their results to the school board and were able to turn their cafeteria in the Fayetteville Public School District into a zero food waste cafeteria. And now they compost all of their served but not consumed food waste from their plates. And so that brings me to the end of the slides that I have. Again, this is my background. I love to talk about food, student education, all things school food, and happy to answer any questions that anybody has, and or please feel free to reach out. I just realized that I did not put my email address, but I will put that in the chat here in just a second. And so with that, one last thing before I turn it back over to Mary Jane is that the World Wildlife Fund, as we were doing The big study that we have referenced several times in this presentation, we created a data portal for schools to enter their student food waste audit data. And all schools, Mary J, correct me when you come back on if this is not correct. But all schools who want to enter their data into this data collection portal are welcome to, and then it spits you back out at this really handy infographic about what you found and what your results say. And it's kind of like a dashboard analysis, but it's really cool to look at and think about from a progression point of view. So your first audit looks like this, and then your next audits look like that. Some schools choose to do their audits back to back to back, all in 1 week. Some schools, if your goal is to do 5 audits, do them 5 weeks in a row, so 1 each week, so you can normalize across menu changes. Those are options that you can make internally. But if you want to self-report your data to the WWF portal, then I'll just kick it back over to you, Mary Jane, to tell us a little bit more about how to do that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Melissa. That was a really great presentation. I appreciate all of the detail that you went into for each of the strategies, all kind of stemming from the food waste audit. So really, really fantastic information. And yes, it would be super wonderful to have your slides for when we upload it onto the YouTube page to be able to have that as a reference and have all of the links that people can just click to at their leisure as well, as you mentioned. So yes, thank you again. And I'm happy to share more information about the food waste audit database as well. This is free for anyone to use who has conducted their own food waste audit. We really see the database as kind of this way of being an educational environmental tool that can be used in the classroom. So if your students are interested in learning more about kind of this easy data entry process, that's really what it provides. But then it also, as you're inputting the amount of pounds of, let's say, fruit and vegetable waste that you collected during an audit at the school, it'll automatically generate from that poundage what that's equal to in water usage or in the size of an elephant, to kind of make it that wildlife connection or land usage, both in like a negative concept, but also in a positive. So what are the potential savings that that could lead to? I also think that it's gamified a little bit, so you can receive a badge for implementing your first food waste audit, for being a food recovery hero, for composting, or for any other strategy that you might be working on in your school. I'm so happy to provide more information about that as well, and as well as share that in kind of the link for when this webinar is uploaded. But want to save some room if anyone has any questions. I've been monitoring the chat and the Q&A, and I haven't seen too many come through yet, but if you'd like to come off mute and ask any questions or share in the chat, please feel free to do so. I am going to stop the recording, but thank you everyone for joining, and thank you again, Melissa. That was really, just really love that level of detail.